All right, so let's talk about Super Bowl 56 and who I think is going to win all of this good stuff. I've made 1,000 film studies now, breaking down every little thing, but I wanted to now make just one video talking about my general thoughts on the game as a whole. So if you haven't seen any of my content up until this video, you don't have to watch any of it. This is going to be where I kind of explain my entire thoughts on Super Bowl 56, who I have winning, all of that good stuff. So the first thing that I think has to be talked about, let's talk about the Bengals offense for a second, how they match up against the Rams defense, because the first thing is just, I think this is going to be a defense-heavy game. I do think defenses will come to play. I think both defenses match up very well. When the Bengals play teams that on average will typically have a 2 safety deep coverage, they only scored 19.4 points, whereas when they play teams that don't do that, they score 35.2 points. That's a big difference, obviously. I also think about the fact that they're only 2-6 when playing those style of teams, whereas they're 11-1 when they play different teams. So big record disparity there. That is another interesting factor here. Whereas for Matt Stafford and the Rams, it's dramatic, but it's not quite as dramatic. Like, they do definitely drop off a little bit. Specifically, Matt Stafford, if you look at him versus winning teams versus not winning teams in terms of this stuff, you will see a big difference. But at the same time, it's kind of a small sample size when you get down that far. So how much do we take that into consideration? So will the Bengals be able to move the ball down the field with consistency against this Rams defense that does a lot? They don't just play cover 2 zone or cover 4 zone. Cover 4 zone is what their quote-unquote base coverage is, but they do a lot. But, you know, I think they should probably run a lot of that coverage because it will be tough for the Bengals to be able to move the ball that much. And it's kind of why we've seen the Bengals offense play very inconsistent at times. It's for that very reason. I think that the other clear thing that would worry you if you're a Bengals fan is going to be this Bengals offensive line going up against the Rams defensive line, specifically the right guard situation. I mean, I don't know who's even going to be playing, but regardless, it wasn't great basically this all season, certainly in the AFC Championship game, and now you have Aaron Donald coming to town. And if you want to double Donald, well, you can do that if you want to, but the issue is, what if he's lined up, you know, again on your left guard? Now you're leaving Adeniji or Carmen one-on-one, right? Because you have to double team with your left guard and center there, meaning that the right guard now has one-on-one matchups, and they have guys who can do that. I don't think it's out of the question that they can get pressure that way. So that's concerning for sure if you're a Bengals fan. And also just like, you know, guys like Leonard Floyd and Von Miller get pressure against anybody. And the Bengals don't love to have other guys come in and block, but they're probably going to have to in this game, you would expect. Or maybe the logic is just get rid of the ball quickly so you don't need more than 1 second, basically. I could see that as another logic. You know, so that's fascinating, I think, for the Bengals and for how they're going to try to make this work. The one X factor with Cincinnati, it's what they love to do, which is run the football. They're a big run the football team. Now, they've gotten away from that a bit. It sort of in these past, you know, the last few weeks of the regular season and then in the postseason. There's a big jump from when they went from, you know, running the ball heavily early on in the year. They've gone off that. They've been more of a pass-heavy team, but they're still not super pass-heavy as much as I would probably like, given their personnel. They do run block better than they pass block, so that's notable. Which, you know, again, hard to pass block a lot worse than we've seen them pass block at times this season. But that's a bit of an over-exaggeration. They're not like the worst offensive line in football in pass protection, but they're not great, and they're going up against great competition. I think it'll be hard to really be able to run the ball too effectively. They'll probably have to use deception to get guys out of position to run the ball, and in fact, they'll probably have to use deception to get guys open in the passing game. Talking about that for a second, you know, Jaylen Ramsey, who I feel like people criticize a lot, he's a good player. Like, I think it's more of a personality thing than a gameplay thing, because he's an amazing player, and he's given up 2 catches of 25-plus yards this season. Both were due to some sort of deception, whether it's him getting fooled or a safety getting fooled, like in the playoff game against Tampa Bay. Mike Evans had that big catch, but that's because the safety who was supposed to be helping got fooled with a over the middle route, which allowed that one-on-one matchup to happen, which Evans won. So you'll need to do stuff like that to probably beat Ramsey, but you have other options. You have T. Higgins, you have Tyler Boyd, and even Joe Mixon in the passing game, and maybe CJ Uzomah has not been announced if he will play, but it'll probably be those guys that really come in handy for Cincinnati. It'll probably be Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins, who are the real guys that are going to be where this, if they can move the ball down the field, it'll probably be by getting the ball into their hands. So I think that's probably what Zac Taylor and the Bengals coaching staff will try and do. One other thing worth noting is it seems like a big way you can beat the Rams, which is a team that, they like to disguise a lot, is with pre-snap motion. It can make things easier. This is part of why San Francisco has had so much success against the Rams. The Bengals, it's not like they never run motion, but they're kind of in the bottom half of the league. Usually they're around 20th with Zac Taylor offenses in terms of motion. So maybe you'd want to do it a little bit more in this game to try and just give Joe Burrow an idea of what's coming before it actually comes. So that's something I could also see being an interesting factor. Moving on to the other side of the ball now, I've already touched on Stafford and how he goes up against the cover 2 zone a little bit. Yeah, the Bengals play primarily cover 2 zone, but much like the Rams, mix things up a lot. It's not just one coverage, although I would say that the Bengals kind of are more inclined to just do one coverage than the Rams are, and I think that's probably benefit to the Rams. I do think I could see a scenario where Sean McVay can scheme this stuff up. I also can't help but think about that Super Bowl 53, where Sean McVay kind of had the right ideas of how to scheme stuff up against the Patriots defense, but the issue is the Patriots defense were prepared for those ideas to happen, and so maybe Sean McVay is going to kind of play off of that in this one. Maybe he's learned his lesson, because you get 2 weeks to prepare, and everyone is so much more focused because it's the biggest game of the year, so these guys are prepared, and you have to be prepared for them being prepared as well, which should be an interesting chess match there. So sort of similar to how the Bengals might not be able to work with Jamar Chase too much due to the defensive scheme, be kind of similar with Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp does perform better against man. Now, he can still beat zone. He's still very good against zone. He's still going to get his yards. So I wouldn't be shocked at all if Cooper Kupp still has a big day. But again, much like the Bengals and kind of in football in general, oftentimes does come down to those second and third receivers. And, guys like Odell Beckham Jr. And Van Jefferson have been very key in this matchup. And Van Jefferson does do better against zone than man, so there's some advantage there. Much like the Bengals, we don't know the status of the Rams starting tight end, Tyler Higbee. But Blanton also does, I think he should be able to fit that role fine. Not as good as Tyler Higbee would, but still fit it fine, I would think. Again, going to the ground game, I do think it is advantage Cincinnati Bengals, largely due to a lot of times the way that the Rams lose in the running game, it's with their receivers blocking. They bring their receivers in almost like tight ends, and it doesn't work out too well. The Rams' ground game hasn't been great, so that's kind of maybe the one thing I could see is if the Rams try to establish the run, which they typically do in this postseason, they've tried to establish a non-existent run constantly, and that could, get you closer to third down, where if you get a stop, then you get the football. So that's another interesting aspect here. So yeah, who is the inherent advantage? Well, it's hard. It's hard to say exactly who you think should be given the advantage, because you can kind of say the same thing about both of these teams. They're very similarly built teams in a lot of ways. If we want to talk about special teams a little bit, we could. Evan McPherson's been on fire this postseason, but Matt Gay has actually had a lot better regular season numbers than McPherson has, so that's a little bit interesting as well. So who do I have winning now? I got to make a decision on who do I have winning, and to be honest, even right now, I have not made my decision. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the recording and really think about it and then come up with my decision. Because I see 2 very clear differences in this game. I think there's 2 significant advantages that each of these teams have. For the Rams, it's kind of obvious. It's the line play. They have much better offensive and defensive lines than the Bengals do. And the Bengals' defensive line's been pretty good, especially this postseason. But still, it's not the Rams' defensive line, and there's no question the Rams' offensive line is better than the Bengals' offensive line. The clear advantage for me, for the Bengals, is Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow is a significant advantage than Matt Stafford. And I think Matt Stafford's very good. I just think Joe Burrow has been amazing this season. I've said in the past, I think you get throw for throw, I would say that Joe Burrow is been the best quarterback of the season. Now, again, most valuable player gets a little bit different because how do you determine value? To me, I do factor in if you've had more attempts, you get more value, but that's a conversation for another day. But Joe Burrow's amazing. And There could be pressure, but Joe Burrow could get out of the pressure. It's stuff like that. There could be small windows. Joe Burrow could fit the ball through those small windows. Nothing could get open right away. Joe Burrow could get more time and then find a way to get stuff open. So that can happen. But the history of the NFL actually says that the team that gets to the in the past 15 years or so, the team that gets to the Super Bowl that has the better quarterback actually isn't more likely to win the Super Bowl, largely because sometimes getting to the Super Bowl, you have other areas of weakness. Like, I think a good example could be last year's Super Bowl, the Chiefs and the Buccaneers. I think Patrick Mahomes had the better season, at least, than Tom Brady that year. So I think going in, you're thinking, okay, well, sure, the Buccaneers have all these advantages, but the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes. But the issue is that there's just sometimes too much to overcome when you're playing a really complete team, and that's what the Rams are. They're a really complete team. It's going to be difficult to make stuff happen, and I think the way that the Rams lose this game is if Stafford has a bad day. I think that the Rams, if they play their best football, win the Super Bowl. So I'm going to pick the Rams to win the Super Bowl. Not by a lot. I'll say 22-17 will be my final score. Rams win. It could go either way. I don't feel confident whatsoever in this pick. It feels like a coin flip game. I picked against both of these teams so far this postseason, so it really could go either way. I don't think that this is an obvious one way or the other, but I'm going to lock in on the Rams. That's what my gut tells me, and we'll see if it works out. Who knows? In a few days, we will know who will win the Super Bowl. Should be fun stuff. But yeah, that's what I think about all of this stuff. Let me know in the comments below, what do you agree or disagree about all of it? There's a lot to talk about. It's a very fascinating situation. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.